when people ask me what is the thing that has changed since I retired, why are these guys going so quick over the long distances at such a depth as well? The factor for me is nutrition.
Welcome back to Fuelin Sessions. Jan, how are you, mate?
Scott, it is good to see you. We've seen some great racing and I am glad to be home. It's been a long few weeks on the road and I'm happy to sit down and have a chat again.
Mate, it has been a while and I've missed you. It's I'm getting questions from people like going, "Are you still doing the podcast with Jan?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm trying to lock him down. You've been so busy, mate, and I don't envy your travel schedule. Just a quick one. Where have you been?
I was down in South Africa for 3 weeks, so that was pleasant. Just with the family, checking out kind of, my old stomping grounds and seeing some of the development that's gone on around Stellenbosch. I mean, it's phenomenal. Stellenbosch is sort of the mecca for European athletes, triathletes as well. But, the 33 and a third meter pool that used to be there is now turned into state-of-the-art 50-meter pool. The track has been done. They've got grass tracks, facilities. Obviously, rugby is huge down there. So there's been a big investment going into it. And the one thing that is magic these days that I haven't been able to take advantage of before was the mountain biking trails. I mean, it's known for the Cape Epic. The road riding there can be a bit sketchy with traffic and things like that. So what people have done is they've invested hugely and heavily into cycling infrastructure, mountain biking infrastructure, and all the farms have somehow tended to agree that people can cross over. And it's just this trail network where you get a pass, and labor being on the cheap side there, people can just afford to build these mazes, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And from there, spend.
Wait. One thing. Hold on. You're in Stellenbosch. I thought you were going to say the one thing I haven't been able to take advantage of because of my career was the wine. The wine in Stellenbosch, pretty spectacular.
I would lie to say that I didn't enjoy a glass of wine every now and then, even during my career. They've got phenomenal food in general. Wine,
unbelievable there.
The level of education on the topic of wine for the general person is just off the Richter scale. And I'm just like, yeah, this is nice wine. No, that's not so. It really is like that. I've got a few friends who are into the wine world and it's phenomenal learning from them.
Very good. Where to from there? Good. Where did you go from Stellenbosch?
From there, I had a quick stopover in Frankfurt. We had our get together for the Ryzen team, and then went to Shanghai for the first time, which really surprised me. Having been to China several times, every single time to Beijing, just with the Olympics and test events and post-Olympic events, and it wasn't really happening. And I'll tell you what. The endurance scene is exploding. It is absolutely phenomenal. I did not see that coming. Cycling, running, people are just out and about. Shanghai Marathon sold out apparently within 5 minutes. The application for the Ironman, the website broke down. It was that popular. And you can see it in the mornings. You ride around and afterwards it is just the finest bikes, the finest cafes, and a mixture of Chinese, English, and Strava being spoken on the local cafes. It really is something that I didn't see coming. Huge coffee
sounds
scene,
like we need to.
Great food.
Sounds like we need to translate Fuelin into Mandarin or whatever the local dialect is and get it in there.
I'll tell you what, there's a huge thirst for knowledge. People are really, really interested to find out more. There is not a lot out there in terms of knowledge that is kind of in the endurance sector. And I found it to be hugely enriching, actually. I mean, people are friendly. The chain gangs give it a go, too. Honestly, I had my work cut out. I mean, I know I've been skiing too much and I haven't been riding enough, but there are a few times that I was pulling 600-700 watt turns and I wasn't getting away from anyone. It's honestly quite surprising how good the level is there. So
wow,
that's
was very cool.
That was a great kind of educational trip. I just didn't see it coming. Really enjoyed Shanghai. Worth a visit.
Were you out there? Were you out there specifically for the marathon or for the Ironman? What were you actually doing there?
I was actually out there for Canyon launching their APEC kind of customization journey on bikes, but decided to spend a few more days to actually explore it for myself as a market. You know, a lot of people always talk about China, trying to get into China as a market, and seeing, you know, with all this triathlon exploding there, there's not really anybody occupying that space. And so I went out there trying to figure out if it's worth diving into deeper.
Sounds
And
like it is.
it definitely is. I was genuinely blown away.
Very
And
cool.
from the Far East, took a journey to the Far West and went over to New York. That was the last trip. Stopped in Barcelona, picked up Emma, and spent, well, 6, 7 days in New York. Also work related, and yeah, quite the contrast. Love that city.
Did you have a pastrami sandwich?
I tell you what, our deal of the Katz's pastrami sandwich has to stand for whenever we do run the New York Marathon. So I didn't want to take away from that and decided to wait for you for the day that we do get to New York.
Mate, I hate to say it, and I'm not one ever to doubt myself, and you know that. Uh, but obviously, I ran the Sydney half marathon the other day, and I did run 129, whatever. But I was thinking another 21 k's to go at this pace. I don't know. So my
Because that's been
3 hour
your big thing,
goal.
right? Running a 3 hour
Well,
marathon.
well, that was the deal. If I run the sub 3 hour marathon, you've got to then come and run New York with me, and we go get the pastrami sandwich. And you're like, I think it's pretty safe, and I've definitely been improving and working towards it, despite getting a little bit older. But I'm reality might be setting in, I think.
Just to remind us, you ran that without any carbs and without your whole theory of what you need to perform well. Wasn't that the case?
Uh, well, no. So I had been on the ketogenic diet. And I think the 10 days or 7 days before, I just had enough. And I did speak to the,
You
I did
cracked.
speak to,
You
well,
cracked.
yeah,
I can't
look,
believe it.
I was in a bad place, mate. Mel was about to divorce me, I think. So, and training, I couldn't complete anything. I just had nothing. So I went back to following the Fuelin program, and lo and behold, HRV suddenly went back to where it should be. My heart rate started getting normalized, and I suddenly started being able to complete sessions. And I did do a carb load. I followed Fuelin. I did my full carb load. I was carbed up, and I consumed around, I think I consumed about 80 grams of carbs during that race, and I felt really good. But I did have at the back of my mind as I crossed the finish line with a big smile on my face, having cracked 1 hour 30. I did have sort of that moment of like, ooh, 21 extra Ks to go. Yeah, that could be tough. So we'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see. Look,
I,
I've got Sydney full marathon coming up at the end of August, and the goal is to run under 3 hours there. I think there's 400 meters of elevation, which is not the easiest of races to try and run under 3 hours, but there's also a bit of downhill as well, so that sort of counts.
well, if you want my secret sauce session for running and improving your speed as well as efficiency, it's 30-second intervals. You got everybody thinks marathon go long. You got to go and put in some 30-second intervals, sub maximal effort, but just there's been some study done around it, but a lot of it is, as so often, anecdotal, coming from, you know, a lot of African runners. But one of my preferred coaches is, his name's Ernie Grun. He took Flora Duffy,
Yep.
and really turned her into the runner that she became in the height of her career. And much of what they did was run 2 sets of 8, 2 sets of 10 at the most, 200s at, you know, as fast as you can comfortably go. Not all out, quick. And you can do the same thing as a hill session, short hills. It's just really something that gets you a huge load of efficiency, a big bang for your buck, basically.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that around the tour, because I think I was doing 800s, and you were like, no, shorten it down, 200s and 400s for the last one. And I definitely incorporate that at least once a week into it. And I love that, because I'm probably more built for the speed stuff. So I actually really enjoy that. And I agree with you. I think it's absolutely fundamental to trying to improve efficiency and speed. I mean, if you want to run fast, you got to run fast, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not a key session, right? It's not one of your track sessions. You just do it. You do an easy jog, kind of 6, 8K, whatever it is, and you do it at the end of that. So it really isn't that big of
Okay.
a session, and shouldn't be, because the effort shouldn't require it. But anyways, let's
Copy.
get
Okay.
back to some nutrition stuff. Can I just say, the new Garmin integration is the business. So good.
Oh, in
I
Fuelin
love
that we
it.
just dropped. Yeah, it's pretty cool, eh?
Yes. Yeah.
It's good.
Very cool.
And makes a big difference. Obviously, if you're using Training Peaks, it automatically refreshes your plan. But for those individuals, and I think we're seeing a huge uptake of athletes without training plans or training platforms. It's a game changer because their plan, yeah, there you go. Like your plan will auto refresh, and you'll see it in your plan, and it will update. Say you had a 30-minute run planned, and you decide to go on a 60 or a 2-hour run, it will change your plan accordingly, which is, it's very cool that you don't have to do it manually anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And well, the running, unfortunately, that's the part of the story I dropped, is that while on my layover in Frankfurt, I tore my calf.
Oh
So
no.
my running's been out the back. Slowly can do like a 5-minute kind of tempo for like 30, 40 minutes. But yeah, it definitely is helpful if you're not on a structured plan like I am no longer. Head out with the boys. Should be 1.5, 2 hour ride, and ends up being 3.5 hour smash fest. It's just definitely helpful coming back and actually seeing the input.
Yeah, well, you suddenly see instead of that lower carb fueling, you probably should have taken on this, and then they will adjust accordingly, which is very
Finally
cool.
seeing some green numbers, green lines in the app again.
Yeah, exactly. Back on your calf, mate. I did a podcast episode. Unfortunately, you couldn't join me. You would have loved it. With Dr. Keith Barr and Dr. Alec Avery, and he's an expert in tendons and collagen. He's at over in California. God, I've got a mental blank on the university. But I think it's USF, University of San Francisco. Would that be correct? Something like that.
Hopefully it's not Harvard. I know that's not in California,
No,
but did
it's
you see
not.
the
It's
news
not
on
Harvard.
Harvard? Jesus, I
It's
got
not
in
Harvard.
just in time.
It's not Harvard, but I think you'll find that episode fascinating in terms of rehabilitation of soft tissue and tendon and all that. A lot of isometrics is certainly where you start off, and using or utilizing collagen specifically in and around the training. So one of your many companies, Pillar, their collagen product is fantastic for it, and we actually discussed that with the Tender. What is it? Tender Fort, the product that they use,
Yeah.
and using the collagen and the vitamin C in combination with loading of the tendon and the muscle is paramount to recovery. So
Yeah,
very fun.
unfortunately, that's one of the anecdotes. And one of the things I bring to Pillar is that through my many injuries over the times and over the years, that is one of the products that actually originated from my tendon struggles that we also tried to address at the end of my career when you and I started working together through Fuelin, obviously, is
Yeah,
that's one of the
yeah. No, it's
products that Damien basically sourced for me in order to try and support that tendon health. So I am the guinea pig for that product.
and it's a good product. So, but look, we have sort of we've sort of talked around it, racing, and I thought, given race season, and I loved your suggestion on this, we maybe go through your race fueling and talk about how your preparation for a race week. And I think, look, let's keep it. Well, shall we do Ironman? I think we base it on Ironman full distance, or do you want to do it based on sort of the half distance for this one?
I don't know. Why don't we start with 70.3? It's something that often gets neglected. And I
Fine.
think a lot of people, start counting gels and think about their race strategy and whatever you've got to get right, which is something, if we go back to the peak of my career, like late 2018, 19, somewhere around there, wasn't around. It was the very earliest days. And if I think of a race like South Africa, there is not a lot I did right by current terms during race. Which is the
Yeah.
first time that I ever consumed a gel in a 70.3 distance, right? Because I was always like, well, an hour. an hour of running. I can get through on whatever I take on the bike. I pop a gel last minute on the bike and then run off, which is the first time that I took a gel for each of the, I think it was 3 laps, if I'm not mistaken. So I took 2 gels during the run there. But what I did get right is a lot of fueling leading up to the race. But let's dive into it.
Okay. And look, I think the 70.3 is a good start, because that also probably for those athletes who are doing the T100 now, because the age group are getting busier with that. I think, you can apply what we're going to talk about to that distance as well. It's pretty much the same. So you talked about getting your fueling right leading up to it. So why don't we talk about the week of the race? Like, what did it look like for you? Like, how did you approach, like, okay, it's Monday, race week. What were you thinking as you came into that week with regards to nutrition specifically?
Well, the thing is that there was still a lot of thinking in and around the carb load and kind of going low carb early in the week, right? That was still definitely a room around there. But because I was using 70.3 Worlds as sort of my kicker to, really get myself back into the motion and back into the swing of things after Ironman Frankfurt, it wasn't that long in between. And I knew that Javi Gomez was racing. I knew that Alistair Brownlee would be racing. And really mentally for me, it was the kick to kind of get myself into gear, which meant that there wasn't too much time to taper for this race. And I was like, okay, if I'm not tapering, if I'm not bringing down the volume, then I can't bring down the food. And so actually for this race, I didn't do a low carb leading into my carb load. What I did do is reduce my coffee intake. That's something I always did. As of sort of the Monday, I would only drink 1 coffee a day just
Sure.
to kind of get myself used to it,
What were
which is
you
something
like?
that we obviously practiced later on as well. And it's still one of my pain points. But honestly, it was something I traveled in that week as well. And I generally just made sure to eat super, for lack of a better word, clean. I was very much focused on eating good whole foods, on, having a good porridge or something like that for breakfast. As we've discussed a few times, my protein would have overall been too low. But in that phase specifically, I would have probably just gone back to fats and carbs. There wouldn't have been much protein along the lines during that week.
You mentioned like you ate clean, I'm putting inverted commas, so that whole foods. Were you concerned about fiber at the start of the week?
To be honest, I was never worried about fiber. I never
Yeah.
ever considered fiber. I mean, I went onto rice earlier in the week rather than, sort of wheat-based carbs, just because I felt like the fluid retention on it wasn't quite as much. And, a lot of it then was still around being weight-based and getting onto a fighting weight. I did feel that this would be a hard bike and a hard run off it. And because the course is quite undulating, I was focused on weight as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Just to clarify, sorry, just the year and the race, just so everyone's clear.
the year was 2018, and the race was Ironman 70.3 World Championships
Worlds.
in South
Yep.
Africa. And unlike the Fuelin recommendation, I was very much focused on eating 3 times a day. I was training, but I felt that all the extra snacking was something that really only added to me adding a bit of weight. And that's obviously something that back in the day we were trying to avoid, trying to be as light as possible in order to run as fast as possible, especially on a bumpy, undulating course like that.
Yeah. Okay. And so, and look, I know we've discussed that many times. It's how, what was being done. And I think it's good to discuss what was done at that point in time. As you led in, and as you said, you didn't really do the low carb. And again, all that sort of changed in terms of a carb load. Like you said, there used to be this period of low carb in the first few days and then 3 days of high carb. Did your carbohydrate load, did you do that for 3 days leading in, or did you just sort of focus on one day before the race?
No, for me, it was always a 3-day thing, which originated back in the Olympics, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
what happened there is that I was so undernourished and so hungry all the time. Basically, what happened is that we checked into the Olympic Village, which was 3 days out, and walking into the food court, I just cracked. I just couldn't do it. And looking at all this food, walking past all these foods, in hindsight, is probably what saved my race, right? 3 days out, and I just started
You-
eating like a champion. But similar thing, no snacks, right? For me, it was always breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was very structured. I'd never veer and have a bar or anything like that. At the time, even like during a training session, it would be absolutely minimal. I was using the Morton already, but I would maybe use half a sachet of the 160, so 20 grams of carbs,
yeah, wow.
just to get in just enough to not be underfueled. And then 3 days out from the race, I would start and actually load up, and I would make sure that I take on extra carbs, drinking. But it was basically a celebration meal, sort of, what would it be? Not 72 hours, but the night of being 3 nights out before, and that would generally be a pasta dish and roasted veggies, a ton of olive oil, and just plain and simple, basically.
And when you look back on that compared to, say, the carb load that you did for Milwaukee, was there a difference in the volume of food, do you think, as you became a little bit more aware of total amounts like that? I think we had you at around 12 grams per kilo for carbs for Milwaukee, but was there a difference, or had you actually guessed it pretty well? Had you sort of, worked out what you needed without measuring it?
It'd be an interesting exercise to do because I honestly never measured it. There was no measurement in there. And it was just pretty much as I could fit into my stomach without
Yeah.
being uncomfortable. And I've always been a good eater. I've always been able to pour in lots of food, but we should probably try it. I mean, hang on, let's do this. Let's see where we
It's
are.
funny. It's funny because I actually spoke to Daniela about this, and she'd never done it, and I was like, "Oh, it'd be fascinating for you to actually um, document or go through a dummy carb load of what you used to do, and see how close it would be to the recommended amounts that we recommend to athletes in Fuelin, or particular to you."
Let's have a look. All right, let's give this a crack. I had 200 grams of pasta with, what would I say? 2 handfuls of veggies, tomato sauce, and Parmesan cheese.
I love the fact that you're logging that live with Scooter.
All right. Listening. What is it saying? There you go. It says 70 grams of carbs, 68 grams of carbs. There's some protein in that, which I didn't know. 18 grams
For sure. In
and
parsley,
8 grams
there's
of
plenty of protein.
8 grams of fat.
Mhm.
So there you go.
And so
42
at the
grams, which
time,
leaves me
I was going to
at,
say,
at almost half a gram per kilo. Because
I
at the
was going to
time I was
say,
coming in at 76 kilos.
so I mean, if you think about that, like if you were 76 kilos, you at a minimum should have been aiming for 760 grams for a proper carb load.
Yeah, exactly. And you think about it, I had 3 meals.
Yeah.
And okay, maybe it was, I'm guessing 200, may have been 300 grams of pasta. Like I would have definitely had seconds and it would have been a big bowl. But that's one of 3 meals. Okay. And then I would have probably another 40 grams just with nutrition, like with liquids, fluids.
Yeah.
So not even close.
Yeah.
If you multiply that by 3.
Yeah, because I remember when when we did it with Milwaukee, you were like, "Oh my god, this is the equivalent." I think you said 15 cups of rice, and you were like,
It was
"This is
nuts. It was
crazy."
nuts. And it's like the whole day you're at it. If you don't plan it,
Yeah, you
the
got to
day
plan.
before, there is no way you're getting into it. And I mean, I was having oatmeal, raisins, maple syrup for breakfast. That was always my standard breakfast. Kind of the whole ritual of just making sure my stomach stays as close to the norm as possible, which is why very often we'd actually find, accommodations to stay where we'd have cooking facilities or something like that. And make sure that's plannable. So I was good on the planning, but as always, low on the amounts.
Yeah.
Which again is also why I explain a lot of the more modern performances is just people know more.
100%. Like, I mean, but it's fascinating. I find it fascinating because you look at your performances and you're like, I just always say, imagine, imagine you were carved up to your eyeballs. Like, you know, it just quite terrifying thought, I think. So anyway,
Again, though, you can see with the development of performance, you know, I ran a 106 off the bike there,
for sure.
which on that bumpy, at least according to my watch, accurate course, without any of the current shoe generation, you know, that time's still competitive. Like with that time, you can still
Massively
get out there, right?
106. Yeah.
But then you look at Ironman and where it's gone. You know, I was looking at Texas. What 740 gets you 10th place? And I'm like, wow, that escalated quickly, and you can definitely see how the higher carb load impacts the longer distances more. If you have the short distance, yes, you can pull off, but the drop off isn't as significant on the 70.3/T100 distances as it is on the Ironman distances.
100%. I think it just catches up eventually if you don't have that fuel with the power numbers that they're pushing and the pace they're pushing now. They just can't afford to be underfueled. So, yeah, it is very interesting looking at the times that are happening. And look, I think you said it. Some of the gear and the bike setups and all that, I think, is contributing, and shoes definitely contributing. But I think the nutrition is playing an enormous role in what these athletes are now doing and producing.
I agree 100% that nutrition, for me, when people ask me what is the thing that has changed since I retired, why are these guys going so quick over the long distances at such a depth as well? The factor for me is nutrition. It is key. It is not only during the races, it is during training. You're able to perform better, more consistently, more often, recover faster, and go back at it again. To me, that is definitely the natural cause of what is the new way of eating.
Yeah. No. Look, I wouldn't be in the business if I didn't believe that. So, mate, we'll stay on track. Morning of the race, what was it, and how long before the race did you start eating?
So my ritual before the race was always I get up 3 hours before,
Mm-hmm.
and I would straight away make myself a black cup of coffee and some oats. I sometimes prepared them overnight, but I did prefer actually to make them fresh just because I like something warm in the mornings. Early days, it can just always be fresh, especially if you're, you know, if you're a few kilos under ideal weight, then everything tends to feel a little bit fresher. And a warm bowl of oats is just something that kept me going. Again, very much by feel. It was something I'd have a heavy, big meal the night before, same as I described, pasta and veggies, and then that was my go-to. That was my fuel. That was something that kept me full throughout the time as well. Secret sauce in that for me was always a spoonful of coconut oil, which I found to do two things. I found it kept me full. Obviously, it had a satisfying taste, especially when you mix it with maple syrup. But the other thing I found is it really seemed to line my stomach. And again, this is not a scientific thing that I'm trying to express here, but I did feel like it made me bulletproof. Like I could just more resistantly take on whatever it was during the race, because at the time you also didn't always bring your own nutrition, right? You'd pick up whatever there is on race course. And for a big race like Hawaii, ages out what's coming and what they serve. But on any other race, it just made me, what I thought made my stomach more relatable. So that was coconut oil, good spoonful of MCT, I guess.
The fascinating
And
thing about that yarn is that theoretically, consumption of fat would actually slow down gastric emptying and could potentially increase the likelihood of gastrointestinal distress, which is fascinating because, again, what it highlights is the individual nuances of nutrition. Would I recommend that to you now? No, definitely not. Did you do it and did it work for you? Yeah, it did. Who am
yeah,
I?
absolutely.
And that worked for
And
you.
it's what we've spoken to many times, right? That it is a process, and to recommend one and the same thing for everybody all the time and force them into that drawer, I think is to a degree foolish, because we are individuals, and where we've come from is just a journey in terms of nutrition, in terms of our physiology, and of course what we like as well. So I think to start, with a baseline, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense, but the individual adaptations need to be there, and they take a while. You can't try something once and say, oh, that works for me, that didn't work for me. But I agree that there are a lot of things that in theory could have been improved, but as you said, worked all right.
Yeah, look, I 100% agree, and that's exactly, I think, our approach with Fuelin. The principles are sound for 90% of people, probably more.
Yeah,
The sound principles of performance nutrition will work and have a really profound impact on them, male and female. But then, as you say, hey, well, what about this? And then you try that and you do it repeatedly in training. And as you said, it's not just a one-off. You find out what works with you over time. Could be 6 months, could be a year, multiple races, but there's always going to be those little things, isn't there? Those quirky little things that an athlete does
totally.
that makes them special. And I that's also what I love about nutrition. I think that there's always
Yeah,
these little things in between.
yeah, we've talked about it before, right? The most effective drug that has a 70% success rate is placebo.
For sure.
And you believing in it, me believing in this coconut oil, is just something. Funny enough, um, it was Vladimir Klitschko. He was a heavyweight boxing world
Boxer.
champion
Yeah.
who got me onto coconut oil, because we randomly met in a place in Hamburg and got chatting, and he was telling me about coconut oil being his new thing for his face that he puts on for a fight, because unlike Vaseline, it gave his skin more elasticity and he wouldn't get cut as quickly. And I was like, geez, if it works for this guy, let me try. And we actually started using it as a massage treatment. And yeah, coconut oil became this thing that I consumed copious amounts of, either through my skin or my nutrition, which brings me to my last ritual pre-morning, is that I'd have this food, I'd have my bowl of oats, however much I thought I could stomach, again, completely not measured, made nice and sweet with a black coffee. And then I would have a short stretching session, 10 to 15 minutes, some neural activation, and put on my playlist Till I Collapse, Eminem, and a few others, and get ready for the race.
Was it always Eminem? Just always?
Yeah, yeah.
How
Pretty
good.
much from day dot. Like, it started before the Olympics, and I changed out every other song on my playlist, but just that kind of that intro, that dun dun dun, dun just got me
Great song.
fired up every single time.
Great song. Great song. Very cool. Very cool. We will dive into coconut oil another time because I want to stay on track here. You get into the race, or before the swim. Okay, so is that it? You just had oatmeal and the coffee, and you wouldn't do anything else before the start of the
No, that's
race? Would
it.
you have
Before the start of the race, I'd pop a
gel?
gel 15 minutes out.
How many? Just
Um,
one? I
just
guess
one.
it was just one. Yeah.
It was just one. And
And then swim
at
time.
that time, caffeine wasn't a thing yet, right? So
Yeah, I
there
was
was no
going to
caffeine
say.
gel, and there was no caffeinated drink powder for the bottle either. So
Mm.
that became interesting, because caffeine was taken, well, or sorry, not was taken. I took caffeine in form of tablets, um, and that would have probably been a decent hit. So I'm guessing 200 milligrams. To be honest,
Yeah.
I would have to have a look, but it would be as per recommendation that you would go and have one big hit rather than just spread it throughout
And that's
before the race.
absolutely bang on. But that's bang on. Like, and it's always interesting listening to athletes like yourself who, whether you knew that or not, or whether you'd been advised, about an hour before the swim start, take in that 200 milligram bolus. And it's interesting you say you use caffeine pills. It's actually my preferred caffeine source, I think, because you're getting that 200 milligrams in the pill, as opposed to potentially in the gels and the drinks, which I'm sure have the 200 milligrams, but I just for me, it's sort of like, okay, you are taking a dedicated amount at that point in time. So interesting you took it in that form.
Yeah, that was pre-race. And
Yep.
then,
Swim,
since
obviously, got into
swim,
it.
there's not much you can do. It was
Yep.
a long run across the beach, get onto the bike. And because caffeine wasn't a thing, and because I'm such a junkie, I would go and source cold brew coffee, and I would mix cold brew coffee as my liquid mixture into my Morton. So the 320 bags were around,
Really?
80 grams of carbs were around, but my water to coffee ratio would be like 50-50. So you'd have that really sweet, delicious coffee taste on the bike, which
With the
early on the
Morton.
bike is fine. I get it that over time that flavor would probably fatigue, but it was the best tasting Morton you've ever had
Oh man,
because,
what do you condensed? Have you ever had condensed milk in coffee? Have you ever
man, I
done
lived
that?
in Spain for ages. That's what they
Oh,
drink. Yeah.
it's the best. Like I can imagine that Morton with the cold brew would be a little bit like that without the creaminess sort of factor, but deliciously sweet. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. So you did your own caffeinated Morton mix on the bike, and you would smash that first. How quickly were you trying to get that 80 grams in on the bike in the
I was
first?
not. This was definitely a feel thing. I was making sure that I was taking up enough, but it is obviously from memory, and it's been a few years since.
Yeah.
But there'd be two bottles, um, possibly. Yeah, I would have not even taken a third bottle for weight purposes because it was a bumpy course, and that was obviously always my Achilles heel were bumpy ride courses. I knew Alistair was going to be aggressive, so really I had two bottles, and that would have been a total with the correct mixture of, let me think about this, 120, hang on,
They were 80-gram sachets still then, weren't
80
they?
gram sachets, a bottle and a half. So 120, about 220 grams, because my hydration bladder inside my frame at the time would have held, actually it was still, no, that was before it was in the frame, it was at the front, but it wouldn't have quite held 750. So I'm guessing 220 grams of
Okay.
carbs.
Yep.
And I had two gels. I had one gel at the halfway mark and one gel just before hitting the run.
So another 50 grams. So about 270 total.
About 270. Yeah.
And how long did
For
the
a
bike take you?
2 hour ride,
Yeah. So
which
we're
that's
talking, what
pretty
did you
solid.
say? 2017, yeah.
218. Yeah.
218.
Yeah.
I mean, it just wasn't talked about a lot at that point in time in terms of 100, 120 grams an hour. Like
No, it wasn't a
in
thing
your,
at all. No one
yeah,
knew
in
about
your
it.
mind, was anyone doing that? Were the other athletes doing this, to your knowledge?
In my mind, I didn't think that was the secret sauce. I thought the secret sauce was the gel on the run, because I was like,
Ah, copy. Okay.
no one is crazy enough to take a gel on the run. Like, it's ridiculous. You're running for an hour and a little bit. Like, why would you go
At
and
full pace.
ever run that much? Ever take extra
Okay.
extra
Yeah.
carbs, extra weight, and that's definitely something that I felt making a difference.
Okay, so you get off the bike. What position were you in at this point in time?
So that was quite a thing. Alistair and I just went head to head, smashing each other on the bike, and Javi Gomez was sitting in the group um, most of the day, and I was so freaked out that he was just going to come and just smash us. He was just going to take us to town on that half marathon, because we'd really, really been trying to drop each other until the last 10K, which is when what's the Aussie kid, Sam Appleton. He took
Yeah,
the
Apo.
lead, and he basically Appa rode us into T2 for the last 10K. And then what happened is that I got off the bike, probably first or second, and there was a bike handler there, and he decided to change his mind last minute, that he really, really wanted to take my bike, but I had my bike on my right, and he was at the same time on my left. So he ran across at the last minute to take my bike, and I tumbled, fell over, and that is probably where I cracked my hip. where I had where I got my stress fracture that took me out of Hawaii was in that moment where I basically tumbled onto the floor. And with the adrenaline, I just didn't feel it. I mean, again, it's a stress fracture, right? Which would have had a lot of load on it before. But that's the only impact that came across in that whole time. Got into my shoes, started running out, and I was running out about fifth place, but probably still slightly ahead of Alistair. And Alistair comes blasting past. I mean, like ridiculous speed. Like we're talking Olympic days kind of speed. And I'm like, oh God, here we go. Losing to this guy again. And Javi was there and everyone was there, and the pace was hot, like red hot. And I was just like, oh, this is not great. We turned left to go up this hill because it was a U-shaped course. And on every end of the U, you had to sort of run up to come back down and then do the flat bit along the promenade. And I saw Alistair get some distance, not too much, and was running along with Javier. And then on the descent, I could actually lengthen my stride, and I saw, oh, things are starting to go quite good. And from a nutrition point, I was just focused on, I really had to think about this gel. It was so foreign to me to take a gel on this kind of distance or a half marathon that pretty much I caught up to Alistair and used the moment straight away, not to attack him, but to take my gel and just make sure that I've got it in. And worst case, I've got one gel in the bank, and that's going to get me through.
And were they taking gels on, or literally no one was doing this?
No one that I knew of was taking gels
Okay.
on. You know, it was kind of
And did
this
you do it?
revolutionary technology with
Yeah.
their pectins, you know, to make it so much more digestible. And the syrupy stuff that we'd known just wasn't really an option during a run. Like it was just such a gamble whether your stomach would hold it or not at that kind of intensity, especially.
Yeah. And did you do it purposely in front of them so they saw you take the gel?
No, I definitely wanted to keep this to myself. There was
Oh,
just
okay.
kind of like I made sure I was half a step behind,
Yeah.
and then just took it. I mean, it's weird if you think about it. I mean, every other age grouper would have probably been doing it, right? They would have been
Yeah.
taking gels simply because that's what they needed. But for us,
Oh,
the intensity was just that high, and we were so used to being so fat adapted that it
yeah.
wasn't a thing.
You say that a lot of athletes would have been doing it, but I can tell you now, 2018, not many age groupers would have been taking gels on either because A, they tasted probably so bad and it was only just starting to get a little bit better. But B, I think just the notion of fueling correctly in races was so poor and probably still is pretty poor to this day, unless they're obviously educated on it. Okay, so what point was that? How far into the run? 30 minutes? 20 minutes?
Yeah, I would guess. I would guess after a lap, so probably after 7K, and then another one after 14K. But at 14K, I was leading the race.
Yeah.
I was out there, and there's a few dynamics with Javi closing in, and then Javi blew up, and then Alistair finally overtook him again. It was quite something, and at the time, I just made sure that I always would have wanted to have enough in the tank that if anyone closes, I could at least put up a fight and put up a sprint. And that's why I made sure I took another gel at 14. And yeah, and that was it. But if you think about things like, I mean, I was never a big guy for electrolytes or any of these things. My electrolytes was always a pinch of Himalayan sea salt. Those big bags that you buy for $2 or $3.
Yeah.
And
Does the
they're
same
just a
thing.
lot cheaper than those tablets.
It does the same
They
thing.
work.
Sodium is sodium when you break it down from the sodium chloride. So, very good. And obviously, the race went very well, and you came out on top. At the end of the race, you mentioned your hip. Did you have pain immediately as soon as you crossed?
No, the pain came the next day. Like the next day, I was a little bit sore from that. Like it was all starting to wear off. But then I got onto the long haul flight, and I was actually going to do my heat prep in Noosa, because I knew that Pete Jacobs had his best race preparation ever there, and I felt like that could really be an ace up my sleeve to prepare for the last sort of six weeks. And getting off the plane, I could barely walk, like literally barely walk. I tried to go for a jog, but it was so painful. And yeah, I just honestly thought it was kind of immense kind of fatigue of some sort. I had my physio with me, and we didn't suspect much, but yeah, that
Yeah.
was straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, no, absolutely, literally, mates. Unbelievable, unbelievable recap as well. Well done on the memory, actually, and just
Diving
remembering
deep.
everything. It's yeah, no, but I just think it's fascinating listening to athletes of your caliber recap what you did, and the what you did then and what you know now, and how that's sort of evolved. And look, I think awesome episode. Loved it. Love hearing all that. And I think, the next one we do, well, let's go into the full distance and hear what you did at, one of your victories in Kona. And I think, again, it will just be, I think it's a revelation for a lot of people to hear what you did and just how it managed to make you the athlete that you are. So, mate, unless you got anything else you want to add, we can sign it off there. And until next time, we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, I look forward to talking more anecdotes on coconut oil and a few more carbs and and other carb loading techniques. But it's been fun. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Mate, I love it. Thanks, Jan. I'll speak to you soon.